Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I'd like to acknowledge gratefully that we're on unceded Coast Salish territory and stand in solidarity with the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam First Nations. I was speaker number 46, and I unfortunately missed my turn because I was in Toronto for a conference called Mikinakaminis, which is Turtle Island in Anishinaabe. At that conference, which was about literature, justice, and relation, there was a new edition of Sky Lee's novel, Disappearing Moon Cafe, which was launched. I'm a scholar and a poet, and I also live in Mount Pleasant near Chinatown, I should have mentioned. So I regularly am in the neighborhood, shopping, hanging out, doing things there. So Disappearing Moon Cafe, as you may be familiar with, is a really important novel that is set partly in Vancouver's Chinatown, or mostly in Vancouver's Chinatown. And some students at UBC have recently just done a 360 video of Chinatown. And it was a beautiful reminder of how important our history is in understanding our future. So the first point I want to make with that preface is that 20% social housing is not a big ask or even adequate. It should be 100% social housing, like you would see in a city like Vienna. I'm hoping that the City of Vancouver will work with groups to set up 100% social or cooperative housing, rather than selling land to developers and asking for a concession. You've got an MP telling you that she's willing to work with the city to make this happen, and I think there's a lot of potential in partnering federal and provincial governments at this point. So the question for me is not so much development, but what kind of development? And we need development that adds to the social cohesion of Chinatown and enables the people who live there to stay, the right to remain, as was mentioned earlier. So I think Vancouver could learn from the Disneyfication of other Chinatowns across North America and be careful to make sure that the people who live there are able to stay. There's a series of films called Chinese Restaurants. I don't know if you've seen them, but the saddest Chinatown in the whole world, I swear, is in Cuba. And that's because the Chinese community there left. And what you have left in that kind of Chinatown is a fake, empty kind of tourist attraction. We don't want that here. We want a real live community, and you're seeing that live community coming and asking you for help to support affordable and accessible housing here. Francis Bula recently wrote in the Globe and Mail that the Museum of Vancouver is hosting an exhibition looking at the Vienna model for housing in the 21st century. And one of the key elements of the Vienna program that I think we really need here in Vancouver is to ensure that housing produced and rented responds to local incomes and not just market demand that can be driven by investors. Jenny Kwan has asked you to please do not underestimate your power as a city to work with the province and the federal government. And I think you've got a really wonderful opportunity here. And I want to just also say that we know why Chinatown exists. We know the history of systemic discrimination. And we know also that we need systemic equity measures. And market condos will not achieve that kind of systemic equity that we need here. Equity won't happen without a real commitment to make it happen. Many young people want to live in Chinatown, has been said. And I remember saying to Paul Wong, a well-known local artist, you know, we have to move back into Chinatown. Like, I'm not far away, but I want to live in Chinatown too, and I would not want to live in this building. So I think the challenge here is please build something that I would want to move into and that other people like us would want to move into. I am a writer, and I'm working on a statement with some other Chinese Canadian writers like Larissa Lai, Fred Hua, Lai Wan, Carvin Lee, and we don't find it easy to survive as writers in this city, but the city needs us. The city needs its writers, it needs its cultural workers, it needs its storytellers to tell its stories. This is what keeps a community alive. And I have lived in Vancouver for many years. I lived in a housing co-op on 10th and Ontario. And I can attest that it does have diversity of income. Diversity of income is something that came up earlier. We don't need market housing to provide diversity of income. When I lived in that co-op, much of the time I paid market rates. But when I was on strike for 4 months, when hardship hit, the co-op was a lifeline. And so we need housing that provides those kind of lifelines to the inhabitants, and we need that kind of lifeline here in Chinatown. It's been very interesting to hear both sides of the debate and hearing people speak for and against. I think what unites all of us is that we want Chinatown to live. And you've got two visions of Chinatown in front of you right now. One that will lead to more privatization and a fake simulacra of a Chinatown, or one that keeps the people here staying, interacting, keeps the community alive. So please, I hope you will do what you can to do right by this community. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for being here tonight.